Hi, and welcome to Beyond the First Response. I'm excited today. We have a different co-host, our guest host, Steve Huff, the one, the only.
Right.
And
Thank you.
I'm even, no offense, Steve, but I'm even more excited about what we're talking about today. Because Val was with us, Val Groth from Stella Center was with us. I think it was November. I think that's when our episode was.
A year ago, but
yeah,
a few months ago.
I mean, technically it was a year ago. It was last year. But and we're just going to kind of give an update today on the stellate ganglion. I can never say it right. So the
Stellate Ganglion Block, or SGB for short.
Yeah, that's just what I call it, because for some reason stellate doesn't come out of my mouth correctly. However, Steve also gets to hear about it. I mean, we've been talking about it for a while. Obviously, he heard our episode that we had originally, and a lot of cool things that are changing and trying to come up. And I got this block done 3 weeks ago, actually. I think it was 3 weeks now. So I can kind of, we had the anticipation of what it is, what it does. But I had told people that I've been diagnosed with PTSD, which I have probably in my 20s. So that's 30 years ago. And you think you deal with things, and you're seeing counselors and you're put on medicine and you think you're better, and then you're not. And then you get to the point where you're back in therapy, and then you're like, I just can't, I don't understand. And I'm just going to say, I mean, we'll get started on it soon, but I am so grateful that I learned about this and that I had the opportunity to get to do it. And it's not cheap to do, but I know we have grants for veterans and it's assistance, but maybe one day insurance will actually cover it. Fingers crossed.
Hope so.
So with that being said, it's gray here in Chicagoland area. Steve, is it nice there?
It is. It's a little bit chilly in. It's kind of funny. It's Florida, so yesterday the high was in the 50s, and today the high is in the 80s. So I managed to. That's why I'm wearing my flannel. I managed to get a little bit of the Florida bug going on with some of this weather bouncing back and forth. But it's actually pretty beautiful outside today. So looking forward to the podcast. Looking forward to wrapping it up and get back outside and enjoy some of that sunshine.
Good. I know we usually do an icebreaker. I won't torture you this time, Steve, to do it unless you actually had one.
I got nothing except for the only thing I have is, I get to go outside, go play with the cows. So what we're sitting here, we talk about these different things that we do for de-stressing and getting our mind off of things. And that's one of the things I do is I go outside and I play with cows and sell some cows and do these different things. Very peaceful up here. We're on some acreage, so we're away from everybody, but it's a good spot to be in.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it is. And when I was growing up, I was never much of I was more of the preppy kind of guy. But I guess as I have grown, I come to realize and appreciate what that solitude behind having that property and just not hearing sirens at night and not hearing people blaring music at night. So pretty cool stuff.
I just have pictures of cows in my office at work. That's how I get through.
Oh, I love this. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not on my self-care list, but I'll look into it.
They're awesome. So back to why we're really here. There's our icebreaker. We're going to find you a cow, Val. We're going to find you a cow.
Yeah, please do. And the Florida weather.
And the Florida weather. Well, I mean, I think we had that yesterday or the day before. It was like cold and warm.
Oh, that day when it got
sunny and
when we celebrated.
It's a heat wave. We all were wearing shorts and swimming. No. You won't see me swimming. Anyway, so if everyone recalls, or if you're listening for the first time, Val, would you like to go ahead and officially reintroduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me back, by the way. This was really
Yes.
cool. I had a great time with you and Robin before, and it's an honor to be back. I don't know how much we to share at first because there's so much to cover, I feel like. But I guess overall, I am the director of partnerships at Stella. We're a mental health organization that is, it's kind of focused on a really lofty vision that sounds impossible. I think if you, or I guess, it might sound impossible, but we really believe that it's actually is possible to eradicate the symptoms of PTSD and trauma. And we do that with a variety of different modalities, but kind of the bread and butter of what we do are treatments that are biological in nature. So the Stellate Ganglion Block, or SGB, is the one that we do at all of our locations. We also do ketamine at some locations as well. But the Stellate Ganglion Block is, I think, what we're going to talk the most about today. I've had the treatment. I know you're here to share about your story as well. And so that's kind of what I do now, is just trying to get this out there and get it to people who wouldn't otherwise know about it. In my former life, I was working as a social worker and then as a nonprofit founder. And the nonprofit that I built was a school all focused on mental health support and trauma-informed care. So I always was a huge believer in therapy, and I still firmly do. But it was really cool when I first got introduced to Stella, because I realized, like, holy cow, therapy is just a part of the solution. Because when you've had these, these trauma experiences that basically leave a mark on your brain, we often need some kind of a biological intervention to really move the needle. So happy to dive in and talk more, but that's kind of the high level.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, we talked last time, medications help to help get you started. You don't always have to be, you may not always have to be on meds. You may have to, and that's okay. That doesn't change who you are. It doesn't change your ability to live a healthy life. But I didn't have to be on medicines anymore. Well, maybe I should have, I don't know, but I wasn't. But therapy in and out, and you think you get to a point. So in my teens, I was date raped. I was abused physically, mentally, financially, all of that thing. And it took me a long time to get out of that relationship because I'm a pretty strong-willed person. Just ask Steve, he knows. It's that German and Swedish in me. Yeah, yeah. So you don't, often people are like, how do people get in that? I don't know. They find a way in, you don't know. But you think you deal with things sometimes because I'm strong enough. I'm not going to let that get me down. I'm good. I'm controlling it, which is really what it is. We think we're controlling it. Then life goes on, right? You think, oh, well, at least I'm not having nightmares now. At least I'm not seeing that person standing there anymore, things like that. So you're like, yes, I've overcome. In reality, that's when we end up stopping therapy, thinking it's good. That's when we end up going back to what we think are normal habits. But they're not. And then things will trigger. There was things in my marriage with Ken that triggered a lot of things that I started back into therapy. And then when he passed away, I really delved into, oh my gosh, what is all this? And discovered that I had a lot more work to do. And I have a great therapist, so that's key. Therapy, counselor, peer support group, have that accountability and have that consistently in your life. Don't walk away from it. You may have to change the person. Maybe you grow out of that counselor or that peer that you're talking to, but don't let it get away too long. And then pairing it with the SGB shot is like amazing. I've never felt this way in my life. And that's why it's so important for me to get that out there, because I didn't realize how quiet my head could be. I'm like, now what do I do with this empty head? I was telling them at work, I'm like, it's like I have nothing in my head anymore. I don't know what to do. It's so weird.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
Hey, Val. So I have been reading on this ganglion block, and one of the things that I did notice was that it started out as a shot for blocking pain and finding different pain receptors in the body to identify where specifically the pain was. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that made that leap because it's fascinating to me that, you know, Christy has said she went and got the shot. We've discussed it numerous times now where people go and get the shot and it's almost an immediate effect on that part of that central nervous system that just takes your anxiety and just lets it all fly. So how did that come about? How did we get to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the Stellate Ganglion Block, as you mentioned, it did come from the pain management world. It's been around for about 100+ years in that space. So definitely not new in the scheme of medicine. Now, the SGB for trauma symptom relief is a little bit newer. It's been about 15 years. I'm going to look to the side only because I'm going to quote you on a couple of dates that I don't have committed to memory. The first use of this for something related to mental health was actually in 1947. So there was an earlier case of when this started to be used for reasons other than pain. Essentially, at that time, though, is when you started to see the advent of medications, all the psychotropics and the pharmaceutical industry became what it is. So then it was kind of put aside. However, around 2008 is when our chief medical officer published the first results of SGB for mental health. Dr. Lipov and a couple of other doctors kind of stumbled upon this kind of by happenstance around the same time. And it was kind of serendipitous that Dr. Lipov was one of the folks who was the doctor to find that. His father was in World War II in the former Soviet Ukraine, had very, very severe PTSD. In fact, his mom kind of developed so much secondary trauma from that relationship that unfortunately she actually died by suicide when Dr. Lipov was in medical school. So he has always kind of grown up with this trauma in his family and PTSD in himself and his family. And so when he stumbled upon this, it was just kind of fortuitous that he was one of those doctors because he is just so passionate about this topic. So he kind of dove into that and started to do a bunch of research studies. And since then, there's been a ton of great research, both from our chief medical officer as well as other physicians. This has been done at military bases across the country, VA clinics across the country, but it's still kind of new and an unknown not kind of a household name yet. And it is interesting to note that what we do is a different version of that older SGB. And so it can be a little bit tricky because if someone is like, this sounds really cool, I want to go out and learn more, and they're just Googling SGB, they might find older studies that reference that older treatment. And so essentially the older version of this ganglion block is for pain relief. Sometimes you can kind of have some mental health symptom relief as a happy byproduct, but it's not the desired outcome. And if that happens, usually the symptoms only are alleviated for a couple of months and you have to go back. So what we do is a modified version. We call it the dual sympathetic reset. And that was designed specifically for symptoms of PTSD and anxiety. So we can talk about what those outcomes look like and how they differ. But it is a little bit confusing because there is that older version out there and so much other research to back that up.
Right. Yeah. And that's Google's So 80. I use ChatGPT now. So that's what I was looking at.
Interesting. I haven't searched for SGB in there. I should. I'm curious.
Yes. It turned into a nice conversation with a computer. If you've never used ChatGPT before, it is very interesting. But back to what we're talking about, it's just fascinating to me that and the way Christy described it, because when Christy went and got it done, we were talking about it. What was it, Christy? We were talking the other day, I guess about a week or so ago.
Yeah, I think it was actually like the next day.
Yeah,
that's probably still.
Yeah, you were still just just flying levels. So that immediate effect and that immediate release of that anxiety is just it's just incredible. And I know again through some readings and stuff that they had talked about, you guys are doing this a lot up in Chicago with Chicago PD. Yes. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're located across the country. We have about 40 clinics that do SGB nationwide, but we're headquartered here in Chicago. Our chief medical officer is based here. So we have had the honor of working with a lot of Chicago officers. And actually, it's really cool because we've worked with some kind of smaller groups like the Chicago Police Marines, which is a nonprofit subset of Chicago Police, run by someone really, really incredible named Paul Zog, who is the leader of that organization. And we started by treating a lot of folks within that community, and they started to get the word out. And since then, we've treated a bunch of other officers, and they are actually really doing a lot kind of above and beyond to try to get this accessible, not just for all Chicago police officers, but they actually in December spoke in front of a joint city council hearing in Chicago. And their ask is to get this covered for all city employees. So that's police officers, first, firefighters, dispatchers, EMT, but also teachers and everyone else who works in a city job, because we know that trauma is so prevalent within the first responder community, but it is certainly not isolated to that world.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's been so cool, I think, to see that happening, because these individuals are just being really brave and using their voices to really hopefully make an impact on a pretty large scale.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. It's excellent to see yet another resource available, because and again, Christy's already kind of alluded to this. One size doesn't fit all. So we need those a plethora of different tools in the toolbox to be able to do what we need to do. So, Christy, I'm not going to hijack your.
Oh no, you're good.
Yeah.
No, you're good. You're good. It is. I mean, it was a full house there that day when I went, and so I'm just observing everything, and there were people there doing the ketamine drip, and a lot were doing the SGB or G. I said it right. Yeah. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yep, that's it.
Yep.
I'm not going to
Look at you.
lie. I was going like before. I'm like, it's GS. No, it is not a gunshot. It's not a gunshot. That was like everything that hit my head.
Oh,
But,
geez.
and it was all walks of life. And that was the interesting. And I was trying to listen to people when they were talking, but everybody's very friendly. And Dr. Lipov did mine. So that was kind of fun. He's pretty cool. He was very laid back, because you never know, people can be kind of stuffy, or doctors might not have great bedside manner, but he was fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's getting to do this. I'm curious. I actually have a lot of questions for you, if I can tables. So I've gotten SGB, so I can certainly speak to my own experiences and like what I thought before and after. But I'm curious, like, did you have reservations going into it, and what were they? Because when I first heard about this, I'll be honest, it sounded really invasive, like the idea of a needle right here in your neck. And I know we talked about how it works on the former podcast. We can do that again if that's helpful. But it kind of just sounds a little bit out there, and I was really nervous about it. I've always kind of said I have just a particular worry about this area, because my husband's had spine surgeries, and he's always like telling me how important spine health is, right? So I was nervous to get it, and when I got it, I thought, oh my God, this is easier than going to the dentist. What was I worried about? But I'm curious, did you also have any fears or reservations? And
I didn't.
Okay.
And I did the local. I didn't do the Twilight. You could go under, but I've also had biopsies on my throat before. So I kind of knew what the pressure.
Yeah, you're no problem.
Yeah. I didn't have reservations in that. I'm like, well, my thought is I'll be the one it doesn't work on. Right. That was my mindset before. I'll be the one that it doesn't work on. I'm never going to get past this. I won't be able to pull out whatever it is I just can't let go of. But I'm like, but I think this is what I need to try. The minute that we talked about it on the last episode, it's like, I have to try this. It makes complete sense. So when we went in and did it, so they do 2 spots, and that's the dual, right?
Yep.
The 2 spots.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And of course my blood pressure was high, because you're sticking needles in me and I don't know if it's going to work. But, and the first one, the local goes in, the first one, it was okay. You feel the pressure of it when they do the 2 pumps of it. But you're jamming, someone's holding your hand. I'm like, do I get wine too? I should.
And for those who don't know, the local is the local anesthetic.
Yeah,
so
local. Yes, thank you.
You're not feeling any pain.
Yeah, no. Then the second one comes, and that one was a little bit uncomfortable, because I think the area, but as soon as that second one, it's like I felt this burst. So my first thought was, what just happened? Because I felt this burst of, I don't even know what it was, probably all of the built up and the change. And then it was just like, and I said, I'm so calm, instantly calm, instantly, like any fear or playing through the worst case, catastrophizing everything that I don't do that anymore. And we'll talk about that, because then you have to see, is it going to really stay this way? I mean, yes, it's been 3 weeks, but still. And it was just like, Doc, I like you. Like, you were listening to some good music, because it was great music. But at the end of it, I realized, I'm like, I have never taken this big of breath before. The only other time I felt like I could breathe, and I don't feel guilty saying it now, but I did then, was when the chief came to the door. 25 years of my life made sense. It was like I could take a breath, because it's like, it makes sense now. Then it was doing the work to help everybody get past and have conversations. And then, there's back in therapy, you're working on stuff. It's like, she's telling me, just let it go. I can't let this go. I have to understand why. Well, we're not going to know all the answers why. And she's like, quit telling yourself stories. I'm like, well, I got to tell myself something, because it's all up here. I don't even feel that I have to figure out the story. It's not meant for me to know. It's not meant for me to hold on to. And now it's just like, and when I got home that day, I know you're going to need a driver if you do it. I'm like, I'm getting a local. Will I really need a driver? Well, yeah, you do. Because I was like, wow, this is cool. And when my daughter got home from school, she's like, how was it, Mom? I'm like, it's so good. She's looking at me.
And I feel like we should cut into mention, like, this is not psychoactive. Like,
no, not at all. It's just that I was always so
really cool. Like, ketamine changes your brain chemistry. There's a little bit of that kind of hallucinatory process with that. Yeah. This is not psychoactive. What we inject is just an anesthetic, the same one used during childbirth.
Yeah.
So this is really just like your brain feeling like itself again, and feeling
which didn't work for me during childbirth. So, that did nothing for me. Right. But yeah, it was just like, wow, my brain and my body instantly was relaxed. And it has not been so relaxed in probably since I was born, even if it was then, who knows? I've lived on that hypervigilance side for my entire life. That is just like, I mean, I would be uptight if I'm running late. I have to be somewhere 2 hours before if I'm going to the airport, because I can't be late. What if there's a line? Silly things like that too. I could put everything together. I knew who everybody was around me. I knew when that car wasn't the right car to be here. I knew that sound wasn't coming where it should come from. And all of that, I hear that stuff, but it's not affecting me. And it's huge. And even in my line of work, there's a lot of stress in mortgage lending. There's a lot of stress, especially right now. There's a lot of stress in dealing with people and their financial struggles, or just finances in general. And I would take it as mine. And I'd be like, see, all of this that's been going on my entire life, it is me. Da, 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 da. They can yell, they can get upset. And then I'm like, okay, so now let's do this. And it doesn't come home with me. It doesn't come home with me. And I've never had something not come home with me.
Oh,
yeah.
I hear those stories every single day, but it never gets old. And that makes my day to know that you are feeling so great. Like, we hear so many different kinds of reactions, but like the common one that kind of comes up the most is, a lot of people say it feels like I was living my life with like 500 pounds strapped to my chest, and like it just someone took it,
it's interesting you say that, because I don't feel chest pain anymore. Yeah. And that's huge, because then it's like I don't feel heavy. And you don't realize how much, when your mental health struggles and PTSD is with you, whether you know it's there or not, you don't realize how heavy it is, because you don't want to talk to people about it, because you don't want to burden them with what you're going through. And even if you do talk to them, it helps briefly, but unless you have another tool to go with it, just like this, it's going to come back to you.
You kind of alluded to hypervigilance and those symptoms that you experienced before. What I think is really cool about this is we work with a lot of individuals who are still in active duty settings, so active duty first responders or military. And the term block, the stellate ganglion block, I think is kind of a misnomer because it almost implies that it's going to block you from being able to react appropriately. But we've actually found there's studies that show that this can actually improve your reaction time. So, those of us here are not in those settings, but for someone who is going, back into a combat zone or who might be even living in an unsafe environment, this will not take away your ability to have your amygdala do its thing and have that fight or flight kick in when you need to, but it stops it from working when it doesn't need to, right? Like if you are, at the mall with your daughter and someone drops a backpack, you're not going to like completely, freak out and have that kind of derail the rest of your day. So it actually can, like for those individuals, like responders, like we found that it actually helps them to be more present, make better decisions, be more rational on the job. But it just allows you to be calm in settings where you are safe, which is really great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even, I'm still completely aware of everything. I'm just not playing everything out in my head anymore.
And Valerie, thanks for bringing that piece of it up because I specifically went looking for that information on the reactionary times, on the processing times, because this is one of those things that, being a former cop for 25 years, I don't, and I'm sure I'm speaking for the masses here. We don't want anything that is going to lessen that ability to make a decision quickly. And although it sounds like it's and you could correct me on this if I'm wrong, because by all means, that's why you're here. You're the expert, right? So that after that initial shot, there may be that euphoric feeling and whatnot, but that will wane if I understand correctly.
Yes.
And then the body goes back to processing normally. I hate to say the word normally, but you're not feeling that euphoric feel. You're back to being able to compartmentalize. You're back to being able to process, organize, do what you need to do without the worry of the block affecting anything.
Yeah, and we talked about this, I think, pretty extensively in the last podcast, but worth noting, we never say this is a solution because whatever caused you to experience those trauma symptoms, that's still a memory. You still need to do the work and process that with some kind of a talk therapist, right? Or have the peer support, the yoga, the meditation, whatever those tools are that work for you. So there's 3 kind of factors that go into how long this is going to last in your life. And it's quite long lasting. And I also should mention, just in terms of like how many people get results, 83% of people feel kind of the way that Christy described, in terms of like an immediate sense of calm and alleviation of the racing heart, racing thoughts, the hypervigilance, irritability, insomnia, nightmares. That happens for 83% of people. Another about 10 or so percent come back and need a second side. So between the 1 or sometimes 1 and 2, we're kind of like 92%. So it's not 100% because nothing is ever 100% medicine, right. But it is amazing how close it comes. And I think the outcomes being so extraordinary in that way is almost one of the drawbacks, because we are not used to thinking about medicine in those kinds of terms, right? So I think so many people assume this is too good to be true. And as people like me and Christy can tell you from personal experience, it is very real. But I think that can be a challenge in trying to get this out there, because this sounds almost like it's
voodoo.
Yeah.
It's voodoo. Yep.
It's funny that you say that. And because it has to do with the brain, it has to do with your mind, and the mind scares people so much that then now you're adding this to it. There's no way.
Well, and I can kind of explain the basic biology of how it works. And there's like all sorts of science beyond even what I fully understand as a layperson. But essentially, the stellate ganglion is the bundle of nerves right here. There's two on the right and left sides of the neck, and that connects to the amygdala where we know that fight or flight happens. So when you have a trauma exposure, that area releases what's called nerve growth factor. And I picture kind of like a highway or a spider web. So it kind of like starts sprouting out and gets bigger and bigger. And so that could be a one-time trauma that's really huge, or it can be lots of little traumas that accumulate. We found, and based on tons of research, that the brain doesn't know the difference. And kind of a fun fact, this is not our focus at Stella, but this has been done on animals kind of in a limited fashion. Like we've done this on, or people have done this on dogs effectively, and it works. And that I think just shows exactly what we're saying here is like trauma is trauma. And so, there's so much around, I think people often want to compare their trauma. We hear from, younger veterans who are like, well, I don't really have PTSD. I wasn't didn't fight in Vietnam, right? Or first responders that are like, well, I don't have real trauma. Like I don't, grow up on like the south side of Chicago where I'm exposed to violence every day. And we always kind of want to assume that our trauma isn't as bad, right, as someone else's, but the brain doesn't see it that way. And so that happens in that area. And so when we inject that anesthetic, it basically kind of prunes back that excess nerve growth factor. So then again, your amygdala is still doing what it's going to do as it should be functioning. But there's not that extra nerve growth factor, which is what kind of releases norepinephrine or that stress response. So I was saying there's kind of the three things that depend on how long it lasts. One is your biology, all of our bodies are just a little bit different in terms of just how we metabolize different things. Two is what you're doing. So we always say, have this as step one, do the work, and this is going to be long lasting once you can work with your talk therapist, make those changes in behavioral insights, right? And also what you're going back to. So if you are a first responder and you're going back and you're facing tough traumas, this might not last for 10 years. Like it's possible it could last for a civilian. We say typically expect many months, often it's years. We have some folks, it's been literally, 7+ years and they haven't had to come back. Some folks might come back and get almost like a booster every couple of years if they are going back into those situations. But the National Center for PTSD says that if you have a 10-point drop in your symptoms from before to after, that's a significant improvement to strive for. And our average drop is 29 points, so almost 3 times.
Wow.
Our average for first responders is 33 points. So you don't have to have a formal diagnosis of PTSD or anxiety to get this. We look at the symptoms, not a diagnosis, but it's not unheard of for folks to have that formal diagnosis on the front end to get SGB, do their talk therapy, and they often will lose that diagnosis because their symptoms have just kind of completely dissipated.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That is so crazy.
And it's finding the right, I'd be curious how, and I can't remember I don't think in the questionnaire they ask, are you in therapy? Are you seeing a counselor or a doctor? I think I'd be curious to see how many are actually in the process of doing that when they get this. If those numbers are higher than and lasting longer because you've been working on it. So like for me, I've been working on it, but I just sat there and my counselor is great. And she her husband is a retired cop and now he's a counselor too. So, I came in with, I'm not, first she told me I was giving her my resume. Well, I'm like, no, I'm not going to stay around doing this. And then it's amazing what she's done. But then I'm like, I just can't, I don't understand. Coupled with this, I didn't tell her I was doing this either. I wanted to see if she would see anything. And when I went back, she's just looking at me a little weird because I'm not fidgeting. I'm not, uptight.
Yeah.
So, and then I told her, I'm like, so this is what I got done, but I'm now able to work through what I just couldn't, what was blocking that layer that was protecting me, or in my mind, I thought was protecting me.
I had the same experience working with my own therapist. I wrote a post about this because it was just, you know, I had been working at Stella and seen this happening, and when it happened for me, I was like, oh my God, this is real. I was doing a health history with a new therapist, excuse me, and I was recounting a very, very triggering experience that otherwise I couldn't have talked about without crying, like full body response. And she literally stopped me and she was like, Val, do you realize you are smiling while you're talking about this experience? And I mean, maybe that doesn't sound distinctive, but like it was life-changing. And
Yeah.
I'll never forget the way that I kind of thought about it in the moment. I don't know if you can identify with this at all, Christy, but before this experience that was traumatizing, and the people involved felt like it was just kind of like almost like I was living in a bubble of like, it was always there in front of me. The people involved were always there. And it was very like technical and visceral. And after, it was like, I had the memory, it still happened, but it was like the people were like little ants on this faraway planet in shades of gray. And it's just like, it's not hurting you anymore. It's not
Right.
like hulking over you, you know? So then you can really talk about it as if it's this like removed thing. I mean, it was,
And I was really good at talking about things being removed. And I was really good at not showing people that something was bothering me, but it was when I was alone that it would hit. And now when I'm talking about things, I mean, there's grief. So grief is a different thing. That's a different kind of cycle. But this, it's just like, wow, it doesn't affect me anymore. It's not making me stop in the garage and scream or cry or stop somewhere before I get home so that the kids don't see. And that is the first time that I think this has ever happened in my life that I can remember. And that alone is priceless.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I just found something to answer your question that you just asked about how many people are in therapy. We did a study of a few hundred of our patients last year, and of that kind of subset, 79% had tried prescription medication, 58% had tried CBT, 40% EMDR, 22% psychiatric inpatient or partial hospitalization, and 19% wellness retreats. But only 3.1% found other treatments to be helpful. And I mentioned EMDR in the mix there. We, again, always say this works best when it's layered with therapy. And in EMDR is a great example of that, because EMDR has awesome results for trauma, but there's kind of some caveats, because you have to really be in a place where you are willing to put your mind and body through going back and kind of recounting those traumas in a constant, frequent fashion. And it takes multiple sessions to get great outcomes. And so, first of all, a lot of people are not even able to like call that EMDR therapist and sit down in the chair to do that work because they're so stuck in those physiological symptoms. But for those who are, although the end outcomes can be really powerful, it's also not uncommon for someone to almost feel worse before they get better and to want to drop out of treatment, because it just feels really tough when you are already feeling all that, the constriction, et cetera. So we found this can work especially well to help someone then get calm in their body so they can then do a great modality like EMDR.
I agree. And medicines don't work for everybody, first of all, right? And people are afraid of medicines, and I don't blame them. Sometimes cost of medicines staying on them, your insurance doesn't cover them. Now, like we know right now, insurance doesn't cover this, but there are some non-for-profits. If you hit some of their needs, you'll be able to, that will help. And maybe again, eventually this will be covered by insurance goals.
Yeah, well, and on the note of, there's two things there. The psychotropics can be a great fit for some people, but
right,
they're also some really debilitating side effects. There are really no negative side effects to expect with SGB. We've worked with 5,000 plus patients. There's very few, but there's a couple screening reasons why someone wouldn't be a good candidate. We make sure we're only treating people who are, for example, if you're on blood thinners, you need to go off blood thinners for a couple of days. If you have Lyme disease, this won't be as effective. If you're pregnant, have to have the baby first, et cetera. But otherwise, this is safe and effective.
Yep.
This procedure is only 15 minutes. You should rest the rest of the day. You're not bedridden. It's just to like take a Netflix day and kind of relax back at work and doing your life within 24 hours. So very, very safe and effective.
Yep.
You don't have to worry about those negative side effects. On the funding side, as you mentioned, yeah, it's not covered by insurance yet, unfortunately. Really, like, science is just so far ahead of medicine, especially in the PTSD space. But we're moving towards that. Hold on, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I lose my voice when I talk a lot. There is a bill in Congress called the Treat PTSD Act. And if that goes through into law, that would get this covered for all veterans. That doesn't help everyone listening to this podcast, but I mentioned that because I think if that happens, it'll put pressure on CMS and the insurance kind of side of things to cover this. So that has bipartisan support. It's backed by massive national nonprofits like AMVETS, American Legion. Again, just showing this is safe and effective, and we know is going to prevent suicides, help significantly to combat the PTSD epidemic. So we do work with a lot of great nonprofits who can help with different populations, always looking for more though, because there is such a need. We have a lot of folks in the veteran community who will fund this for specific populations like Green Berets, Rangers, SEALs. So if anyone is a part of that, or even their spouses are part of that, let me know and I can give my contact info, and I'm happy to help to connect you to resources. In the first responder space, we have a couple smaller nonprofits. So I say smaller, we just don't have the capacity right now to serve like all of LAPD if we wanted to, but we're working on it and always trying to find new organizations who want to get involved. And what I think is really exciting is I've been a part of some kind of fundraising calls for some of our partner organizations who are finding that this is actually kind of setting themselves apart with their funders, who were like, everyone's doing peer support, which is important, but like no one's doing this. Like this is a really cool thing that they wanted to kind of create new funding for. So I'm hopeful that we're seeing more traction in that community. But I will say, if anyone's listening is connected to any nonprofits, any first responder departments you want us to talk to, I mean, please reach out. That's my goal, is trying to make sure cost is never a barrier for someone. And for anyone who is interested, this is a nonprofit podcast, and just to honor that partnership, we can at least honor a partner rate for anyone who's listening. So if that's
I was going to bring that up. Thank you. I was going to ask.
Yeah. So I should give the email. So email partners@stellacenter.com and just mention you heard the podcast, and we can help out from there. And I also should mention we have revamped our intake process recently in a really exciting way. So what that looks like now is we have highly skilled psychiatric mental health nurse practitioners who do our intake. It's a full biopsychosocial, and they dive into your health history, your mental health history, and really help to make a good determination if this is a good treatment for you. And if it's not, that, make recommendations elsewhere. So even if someone isn't sure, they don't have to know exactly what their symptoms are, or I guess what whether they're a good candidate. We can help with that on our end.
And I have to say they did, because I have autoimmune issues. So there's certain medicines that I've had to go on this past year, unfortunately. And we just made sure we got everything put together and made sure that the doctor said it was okay and it was healthy for me to do. So they're very diligent about that. My doctors took a little bit longer to respond, but that's not surprising. The rheumatologist, they never.
Process,
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So Steve, what do you think? Everything that you've heard right here. I know that we're kind of talking about it on a civilian side, but a first responder side is a first responder family. Is this something that you think, without having it done yourself, do you think that this will get out there, the word will get out there, and people will understand and want to do it?
Yeah, I think in time, it goes right back to the skepticism of, as Valerie was kind of alluding to, that people are very nervous when it comes to dealing with things of the mind and dealing with the discussion of, hey, one shot can can literally knock symptoms down by 80%, 90%. So there's that skepticism there as the science evolves with it, because and I appreciate Valerie bringing up the information about, hey, started about 15 years ago. We all know that 15 years in medical terms, with the exception of some recent things going on, is usually not that long. I will tell you that I've done EMDR and it works phenomenally. I would have no doubt that the block, if I were to decide one day, hey, I need to do something, that it would do what I needed to get done. No doubt about it. Just from what I've read, just from what I've seen, other testimonials, these different things. So I think it's a matter of getting the word out that it's there, putting it out there as another option. And again, Val, thanks for bringing up the fact, hey, this is great, but continue on doing what you've been doing. If you've been doing counseling, keep going to counseling. Keep doing your yoga. Keep doing this and that. This is not a cure-all. So I could see it becoming something that will become a mainstream resource. Just as we pointed out, 90% of the time, what are they quick to do? They're quick to give you pills. I don't know about you guys. I cannot stand taking pills. So it's just one of those things that, it's a great resource. It's got some research behind it that says this works. And I think the more people find out about it, the more first responders find out about it. I think you're going to see them coming into that mainstream, especially with your newer guys coming in whose minds are a little bit more open than us old salty dogs that are like, we'll just fix it by going and punching the shed or something like that, So I can definitely see it going in that direction. No doubt about it.
Good. So I know that you have to go, Val, but for anybody who wants more information as a first responder and the partners at stellacenter.com.
Yeah, that's perfect. If anyone wants to get on a call with one of our nurse practitioners, that's the email, partners@stellacenter.com. If anyone has any specific questions for me, my email is Valerie@Stella Center. So VALERIE @stellacenter.com. What else should I share? And I know I just mentioned first responder, nonprofits, et cetera. I know there's also people listening who are civilians and spouses, et cetera. There's other ways we can get into that world too. I know we're starting to do more work getting to employers and bringing this to companies and making this a part of benefits packages. So I think to your point, Steve, like that's the end goal, is where this is not just available for veterans and first responders, but everyone has kind of gone through their own trauma on some level, as we found. We know that mental health in the workplace is a huge topic these days, and we're seeing more companies wanting to make strides in that department. So yeah, anyone who wants to talk further about anything, I'm happy to.
Perfect. Thank you. And just remembering the most important thing is we're changing lives one conversation at a time, and we're adding tools with each conversation that we have. And this is just another tool that can benefit you, and why not look into it? And you can let us know. You can contact us at First Help as well, and we can get you the information and pass it on if you didn't write it down and you are listening in the car. Same thing. We'll get it to you. So thank you very much, Val. I appreciate it. And I'm blessed that I got to learn about it, because it has been a life changer. And I know it has been and will be for many people in years to come. So
absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you for the chance to be here again. This was great. Always good to see you both, and just thrilled that you've had an awesome experience. So great.
Thank you. Thank you. And we'll talk. We are excited to be able to start our day with Badge Brew Coffee. Hey, Robin, did you know that Badge Brew has a new charitable badge, Collab Roast?
Hey, Christy, I thought I heard that was going to happen.
Yeah, it's called First Response Roast with a spicy, smooth, medium roast with flavor notes of spice cake and citrus undertone.
Oh, that sounds amazing. And if that doesn't tempt our audience, a portion of the proceeds go to First Help. Oh, and don't forget, they're first responder family owned. Whether you're on day shift, night shift, or the shift of raising your family, Badge Brew has your coffee ready and waiting.
So let me ask you, what's your badge of honor? Find out by going to badgebrewcoffee.com and order yours. If you want the First Response Roast, click on Charitable Badge Collab. I know I am.